The truth behind TPM, BitLocker and Windows 11's forced upgrade TPM, BitLocker, Secure Boot, they sound like security features, but once you see how they actually work, you'll understand why millions of users feel cornered. For decades, Windows updates were simple. A new version arrived, you installed it, and your machine kept going. Sometimes it ran faster, sometimes slower, but the basic agreement was the same. The hardware you paid for would stay useful until it physically degraded or you decided to move on. That silent contract is gone. Windows 11 replaced it with something entirely different, a system where your computer isn't judged by performance, but by compliance. And compliance starts with cryptographic hardware most people have never heard of, tied off to couple accounts most people never wanted to use, enforcing rules nobody asked for. And this is not paranoia, it's a policy. The first sign something was off came with a processor list, a curated set of CPUs Microsoft blessed, while nearly identical chips from the same era were declared incompatible. Machines with 4 cores, 8 threads, SSDs and plenty of RAM suddenly became too old, even though they outperformed the base requirements by a mile. If you ever built PC, as I did before, for any length of time, you know how ridiculous this is. A system that can run virtual machines, games, editing software, or even server workloads shouldn't be blocked from running a simple desktop OS. But here we are, and that's where TPM enters the story, not as a performance booster, but as a gatekeeper. So TPM 2.0 is marketed as a security chip, something that keeps encryption keys safe and protects you from hackers. In theory, that's fine. In practice, TPM acts like a permanent ID tag for your computer, a silicon serial number tied directly to your Windows installation and increasingly to your Microsoft account. Is the difference between this is your PC and this is a device registered to an identity in your ecosystem. Most users never realize this shift happened because it's hidden behind friendly language, security, protection, privacy enhancements. But when a device can't install an operating system it can easily run, not because it's weak, but because it lacks the right cryptographic stamp of approval. We are no longer talking about safety, we're talking about control. And once control becomes the priority, every system requirement, every update, every cloud prompt begins to make more sense. TPM is only one layer, BitLocker is the next, and it completes the loop. BitLocker used to be optional. Now, many new Windows 11 systems have it enabled automatically. The moment you sign in with a Microsoft account, your Drive encryption keys got tied to that account and synced to the cloud for safekeeping. Again, sounds good until you realize what it means. If Microsoft controls your identity and your identity controls your encryption, then Microsoft indirectly controls access to your entire drive. Not in the same dramatic they reading your files way, but in the architectural sense that your data depends on their system working exactly as intended. That's not independence, that's dependency disguised as safety. Combine TPM and BitLocker and the operating system knows who you are, what device you're using, and whether your hardware is trusted. And now we add Secure Boot, the final lock in the chain. Secure Boot is supposed to prevent malicious code from starting during the boot, but it also prevents anything from starting unless it's signed with the Microsoft approved key. That means alternative operating systems, custom bootloaders, recovery tools, or even virtualization setups now depend on Microsoft deciding what is legitimate. Some Linux distributions are signed, some are not. Some tools work, some don't. Virtual machines often break unless you manually sign components using the same key authority that Windows enforces. This was not how PCs used to work. The BIOS was yours. The bootloader was yours. The drive was yours. The OS was yours. You could dual boot, modify, customize, experiment, and if something broke, you fix it. Today, Windows 11 behaves like you're borrowing the machine from a corporation that wants updates on everything you do with it. TPM decides whether your hardware is trusted. BitLocker decides whether your storage is accessible. Secure Boot decides whether your software is allowed. And together they form the quiet backbone of Windows 11's forced upgrade ecosystem, a system where your computer must continually prove itself to Microsoft in order to stay fully functional. The biggest misunderstanding in the tech community right now is thinking these features exist purely for your safety. They don't. Right? They exist to enforce consistency and control across a massive global user base, especially now that Microsoft is repositioning Windows as the foundation of their AI-driven future. That's the part most people still don't see. Windows 11 isn't just an operating system, it's an identity platform. Every component, TPM, BitLocker, Secure Boot, OneDrive integration, the Microsoft account requirement, the new recall feature, Copilot's deep system access. Everything ties the user to Microsoft's cloud infrastructure. The more tightly everything is connected, the easier it is to standardize security, enforce policy, and support future AI features that need full system visibility. But the trade-off is simple. The more convenience, automation, and intelligence the system provides, right, the less the user controls. And that trade-off isn't optional anymore. Try setting up a fresh Windows 11 system today. The installer practically drags you into signing in with a Microsoft account. Skip buttons disappear. Network prompts loop until you comply. Workarounds that used to let you create an offline account, typing commands, disabling network drivers, or interrupting setup, they're all being patched one by one. Windows 11 wants your identity tied to your machine because that identity becomes the anchor for everything. Your drive encryption, your cloud files, your apps, your license, your AI settings, and your activity history. So ask yourself this: if the operating system refuses to function until you hand over an account and internet connection, whose computer is it? Older Windows versions let you choose. Windows 11 removes that choice slowly, quietly, update by update. It's the same pattern you see with the Start menu ads, or the aggressive OneDrive onboarding, or the automatic enabling of BitLocker. None of these things break the system. None stop you from using your PC. They just slowly shift the balance of control away from the user and toward the OS. And then there's a recall, the feature that made even Microsoft insiders uncomfortable. A system-level screenshot recorder that quietly takes snapshots of your screen every few seconds, feeding an AI so it can remember everything you've seen or done. Even if Microsoft promises it's local, the fact remains, the operating system now wants a perfect memory of your entire digital life. Combine that with TPM-based identity, encrypted drives tied to cloud accounts, and an AI assistant with deeply rooted system-level permissions, and Windows 11 starts to look less like software and more like ongoing surveillance ecosystem. Not surveillance in the cartoonish sense, nobody is reading your diary or looking at your baby photos. Surveillance in the architectural sense, where the OS has the mechanism to track identity, enforce compliance, analyze behavior, and connect all those dots under one account. This isn't accidental, it's the design. And once you recognize the design, the rest of Windows 11 makes perfect sense. The hardware lockouts, the account requirements, the cloud pushes, the gradually tightening restrictions, right? It's a slow migration from your PC is your tool to your PC is a node in their network. What bothers me the most is the silent expectation that users should simply accept this. That isn't normal for OS to show ads, normal for a desktop to need online activation for basic features, normal for encryption to be tied to a corporate ID, normal for a machine to lose functionality because it doesn't match an arbitrary hardware list. None of this is normal. The real tragedy is that none of these was necessary. Windows could have evolved without locking down older hardware. It could have introduced stronger security features without tying them to cloud accounts. It could have incorporated AI tools without creating a surveillance pipeline inside the OS, right? But those choices, they don't align with Microsoft's new strategy, a future where Windows blends seamlessly with cloud services, subscription ecosystem, AI assistance, and identity-based access. This is why the processor support list is so strangely selective. This is why TPM 2.0 is mandatory instead of optional. This is why local accounts are disappearing one update at a time. And this is why even basic setup screens require an internet connection. When you step back and view all of it as one coordinated shift, pattern becomes obvious. Windows is no longer primarily a desktop environment. It is a control environment. And control environments have rules. Those rules prioritize Microsoft's long-term goals, predictable hardware, standardized device identity, centralized accounts. Windows 11's design philosophy is built around the assumption that every machine should function like a managed corporate device, even if you're a home user who just wants to browse the web, play a few games, and do some small things. But here's the twist. If the OS treats everyone like the part of enterprise, then everyone is subjected to enterprise-level control, whether they want it or not. That's where the pressure starts to feel personal. You buy a laptop with your own money. You build a desktop with parts you choose. You install software you want. You organize your files the way you prefer. You choose how you want your system configured. But Windows 11 makes it clear that your preferences are secondary or optional, or inconvenient. That's why so many people are considering alternatives, not because Linux is cool or because they enjoy configuring the system manually, or because they want to be rebels, hackers, but because they want an operating system that respects the idea of ownership, something that does not nag, track, sync, or enforce, something that feels like a tool again, not a platform built around extracting compliance, right? That's where Linux shines. Most people still believe Linux is for programmers or hard to use or limited. That was true 20 years ago, but it's not true now. The modern Linux desktop is polished, intuitive, and shockingly fast. You download a distro, flash it to a USB stick, reboot, install, and you're done. It takes less time to install Linux Mint or Fedora than it does to finish the Windows 11 out-of-box setup, and without needing to sign in, connect to the cloud, dodge subscription offers. Even better, Linux doesn't care who you are. There's no account requirements, no forced identity, no persistent hardware fingerprint that are tied to your personal information. Your drive is yours. Your bootloader is yours. Your apps are yours. Your data stays on your machine unless you explicitly choose otherwise. And the thing that surprises most people, Linux is not a compromise anymore. Web browsing works perfectly. Office suites are excellent. Gaming has matured thanks to Proton with thousands of titles running as smoothly as they do on Windows. Photo and video editing tools exist. Language models run locally. Servers and containers behave better, and the entire ecosystem feels more like computing used to be clean, efficient, and under your control. Admittedly, there are exceptions. Hardcore competitive shooters with anti-cheat often don't run. Professional Adobe software doesn't have native Linux versions for some reason. Some niche enterprise apps refuse to cooperate, but for 90% of everyday computing and content creation, Linux is not only viable, it's refreshing. And that's the key point here. Windows 11 forces you into a relationship. Linux gives you a choice. Do you want your machine to be an identity terminal for $1 trillion corporation or a personal computer again? That distinction matters more every year. As AI features expand and Microsoft deepens cloud integration, Windows 11 will continue tightening its ecosystem. Privacy becomes a marketing term, security becomes a justification, compliance becomes the expectation, and personal control becomes an afterthought. But the beauty of the PC world is that you don't have to accept that trajectory. The moment you install Linux, the silence is shocking. No ads, no tracking, no account login, no demands for cloud backup. The OS does not try to sell you anything. It doesn't interrupt your work. It doesn't second guess your decisions. Everything feels lighter, faster, and more private. Not because it's minimalist, but because it's designed for you, not against you. Switching isn't about escaping Windows, it's about reclaiming your autonomy. And once you feel that again, it's hard to go back. Once you understand the architecture behind Windows 11, the anxiety people feel about old hardware becoming useless suddenly makes sense. It's not that these machines are incapable, it's that Microsoft wants a world where devices follow predictable rules that makes their AI ecosystem easier to control, maintain, and monetize. But users don't benefit from that predictability. They only inherit the limitations. Think about what actually happens when Windows 10 reaches end of life. Your computer doesn't suddenly stop working. Your CPU doesn't get slower. Your RAM doesn't evaporate. What changes is the narrative. Without updates, you're told your PC is unsafe, unsupported, outdated. But the truth is more nuanced. Security patches matter, yes, but for millions of users running offline machines, home theater PC labs, setups, legacy applications, and fully isolated workstations, the fear is exaggerated. Windows 11 offers no performance boost for them, no major workflow improvement, no must-have features. Instead, it offers restrictions, account lock-ins, and a future shaped entirely around Microsoft interest. This is why so many people feel pushed rather than invited. And pushing always creates resistance. In the past, upgrades happened naturally. People moved from XP to Windows 7 because it was much better. They moved from 7 to 10 because it was cleaner, faster, more stable, and free. But Windows 11 isn't spreading because it's great, it's spreading because the alternative is abandonment. It's important to say this clearly. People aren't switching to Linux because they hate Microsoft, they're switching because they miss the feeling of owning their own machines. And Linux gives that back immediately. Every setting in Linux is transparent, every feature is optional, every component is removable. You're trusted to configure your system the way you want, even if that means breaking it. That's the old spirit of computing, the user decides. Modern Windows, by contrast, treats users like passengers on a locked train. You can adjust the seat, maybe open a window, maybe change the lighting, but the destination, the speed, and the rules are out of your hands. And once you recognize that, you start asking different questions. Why does Windows force an online account for setup? Why does encryption tie itself to your identity? Why are ads part of a paid operating system? Why is cloud backup presented as the default path? Why is the system designed to reject hardware that clearly works? Who benefits from these changes? Because it's not the user. The deeper truth, the one most people avoid saying out loud, is that Windows is not designed for personal freedom anymore. It's designed for corporate scale management, uniformity, compliance, identity tracking, deep integration with cloud AI models. The desktop computer has become the endpoint of a much larger ecosystem, and the OS reflects that shift with every new update. But you don't have to go along with it. For decades, the PC world was defined by choice. Different hardware, different operating system, different workflows. That culture still exists, just not inside Windows. Linux picked up that torch, and today it's more accessible than ever. Whether you choose Ubuntu, Mint, Fedora, CentOS, or something more advanced, the result is the same. You get a system that behaves like a personal device again, not an identity terminal. And the moment that difference clicks, your entire perspective shifts. Windows 11's forced upgrades start to look less like security improvements and more like strategic positioning. TPM starts to look less like a safety tool and more like a gatekeeper. BitLocker starts to feel like less encryption and more like ownership enforcement. Secure Boot begins to resemble a whitelist system controlling what the user is allowed to run. And the cloud account requirements stop looking like a convenience feature and starts looking like dependency. Once you see it that way, there's no going back. People often say switching to Linux is hard, but staying with Windows 11 is harder. Not technically, but philosophically. Every update chips away at the idea that your computer belongs to you. Every requirement is a reminder that Microsoft's vision of the future does not involve user autonomy, and every AI feature pushes you deeper into an ecosystem that monitors, predicts, and adapts around your behavior. You don't have to wait until Windows 12 or whatever comes next. You don't have to let your hardware be declared unworthy. You don't have to let your operating system decide how you compute. You can choose something better right now. Linux is not perfect, but it's honest, it's open, it's yours at the end. And after decades of the industry, I can confidently say the feeling of getting your computer back is worth every second of the switch. If you're ready, I'll show you exactly how to choose a distro and install it on your current hardware. Just comment below if you need it and which distro you want, because your PC still works and you deserve an OS that works for you, not against you. See you next time.